A racist cop publicly assaults a pregnant black woman in a crowded downtown area, unaware that someone important is silently watching the whole incident unfold. As bystanders freeze in shock and whispers begin, the woman's calm, defiant presence speaks louder than the brutality she endures. One line, one moment flips the entire energy and sets the wheels of justice in motion. Get your filthy hands off the sidewalk before someone mistakes you for a human. The words cut through the afternoon air like a whip. They didn't just sting. They stopped the world. Downtown Atlanta, noon, sun glaring down on marble facades and steel benches. A stream of suited office workers moved like ants from glass buildings to overpriced food trucks. Tourists took selfies under the Centennial Park sign. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. Life, in all its speed and noise, stumbled to a halt. At the sound of that voice, Officer Cooper stood with one boot planted squarely against the belly of a woman who should have been the last person on earth to be harmed. Pregnant, alone, black, down on one knee, cradling her stomach with one arm, and shielding her face with the other. Her sundress was dusty, the fabric torn where she'd hit the pavement. Her purse had spilled open beside her, loose change rolling away like tiny witnesses. People were watching. A businessman with an iced coffee froze mid-sip. A teen delivering food stopped pedaling, wide-eyed. A mother yanked her daughter back by the hand, whispering something and retreating toward a bench. And just outside the crowd's line of sight, in the tinted window of a parked black SUV with no plates, someone was watching too. The officer's voice rose again, filled with mockery. "Oh, I'm sorry. Are we playing the victim now? You people are always so dramatic." No one moved. The cop, tall, buzz-cut, white, embodied the type of power that had gone unchecked far too long. He wasn't just yelling, he was enjoying it. His body language dripped superiority. One hand rested casually on his hip near his holster. His jaw was set in a tight, smug grin, like he was the main act in a show he'd performed 100 times before. The woman on the ground, she hadn't said a word. Her silence wasn't a weakness, it was a strategy. There was no panic in her eyes, only a depth that unsettled even Cooper as he stared back. Her hair was tied into a neat bun. Her skin was glowing despite the dust clinging to it. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pushed herself up inch by inch. Not in defiance, in dignity. From the crowd, a voice finally whispered, "Is someone filming?" A girl in a hoodie raised her phone. Another joined in. A ripple of realization began spreading through the people around, but Officer Cooper wasn't concerned. He leaned closer to the woman, lips curling like he was sharing a dirty joke. "You know what your kind is good at?" he hissed. "Lying on the ground and playing dead." Then he did the unthinkable. He kicked her, not hard, not enough to hospitalize her, just enough. Enough to humiliate, enough to spark the pain that would linger long after the bruise faded. Enough to remind her and the crowd of where the power sat. The woman's body jerked. She winced but didn't cry out. Instead, she placed her palm flat on the pavement, slowly rising to her knees. She gathered her things. Her eyes scanned. The crowd pausing at the girl with the phone, then up at the cop, and then she spoke, just one sentence. "You might want to call your supervisor." Her voice was calm, crisp, controlled. The kind of voice that made you second-guess everything. Cooper blinked. "What did you say to me?" She stood, steadying herself. Her dress swayed with the breeze, a streak of dirt across her midsection. A single strand of hair escaped her bun. "I said," she looked him dead in the eye, "you're going to need a lawyer." The words hung in the air like thunder before the storm. Someone in the crowd gasped. Across the street, the black SUV's door clicked open. The man who stepped out wore no uniform, no badge. Just a dark, tailored suit and mirrored shades. But the way the crowd subtly shifted to make room, the way the officers on the other, end of the street suddenly adjusted their postures. It was clear. This man had a presence, authority, power, and he was walking straight toward the scene. Cooper's hand twitched near his holster. A drop of sweat rolled down his temple. He didn't recognize the man, but something in his gut told him he should. The suited man stopped just a few feet away. He didn't look at Cooper. He looked at the woman. "Ma'am," he said gently, "are you all right?" She nodded once, wiping dust from her arms. "I'm fine." Now he turned to the officer. "Name and badge number." Cooper blinked. "Excuse me? Who the hell are—" The man pulled out a leather wallet, flashed an ID. The letters DOJ, Department of Justice, gleamed in gold. Senior Federal Investigator Marcus Dale. "And you've just committed assault on a federal witness, under protection." The silence exploded into chaos. Phones rose, or higher. Voices murmured. The officer's face went white. The woman tilted her head, eyes never leaving the cop. "You kicked the wrong belly today," she said quietly. "And the world's about to feel it." He thought she was just another pregnant black woman on the sidewalk. She was the key witness in a case that could take down half the department, and someone had been watching the whole time. The blinds were drawn, but the heat in the room felt like sunlight, thick, suffocating, the kind of tension you could slice through with a butter knife. Officer Cooper sat stiffly in a chair that felt suddenly too small for his build. Across from him, Marcus Dale adjusted a tablet on the table, its screen locked, unreadable. "Let's go over it again," Dale said, voice low, precise. "From the beginning," Cooper scoffed. "I was responding to a report of a suspicious individual loitering near the courthouse entrance. She was acting erratic, possibly under the influence. I followed protocol." Dale tapped the tablet with one finger. "And your definition of protocol includes a kick to the stomach of a pregnant woman?" Cooper shifted. "She was non-compliant, aggressive. You know how these people can be." Dale's eyebrow rose, slow as an elevator. "These people? I meant, look, I didn't mean anything by that." "You're twisting my words." "No," Dale replied coolly. "You're exposing them." The air thickened. A two-way mirror reflected the scene to the internal affairs team outside. One of them whispered, "That man doesn't even realize he just sank his career." They'd seen it all before. Cops who built their reputation on brute force and paper-thin excuses. But this time was different, because this wasn't just another street incident. This was federal. This had witnesses. And it had her. The woman's name still hadn't been released, not even to the internal circle. All they had was grainy footage and the silence. But Cooper had a record. Nothing official, nothing that ever saw the news. But buried in the files were red flags. Complaints dismissed, bodycam footage missing, witnesses who never showed up to testify. A janitor once reported seeing him push a kid against a cruiser for staring too long. That janitor disappeared from the records the following week. He was the kind of cop the system protected, until now. "So what exactly did you say to her?" Dale asked again. Cooper leaned forward, suddenly angry. "What does it matter? I've had a dozen arrests that started with worse." "Because you weren't just talking to her," Dale said, leaning back in his chair. "You were talking to a room full of people. You were talking to the nation. And the nation's listening now." Cooper clenched his jaw. Why the hell was a pregnant woman even there alone in that area? "She wasn't alone," Dale said, standing. "She just hadn't announced who was watching yet." He walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "You're not being suspended," Dale said flatly. "Not yet." Relief flickered in Cooper's eyes. "You're being investigated for federal obstruction, witness intimidation, and aggravated assault." And just like that, the blood drained from his face. Across town, in a small recovery suite tucked behind a law enforcement safe house, she sat in silence. No name tag, no press coverage, just soft hospital lights and a vase of lilies someone had brought earlier. She stared out the window, rubbing her stomach absent-mindedly. She looked calm, but inside her thoughts burned like fire. She hadn't planned to be seen. She hadn't planned to speak, but when the kick came, something inside her snapped into focus. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about what that kick represented. It was about the hundreds of women before her, pushed down and never heard. The ones whose babies never got justice. The ones whose pain became hashtags for a week and then faded. Her silence would have cost too much, so she'd spoken and the world had listened. Outside her room, a federal agent stood guard. He whispered into a phone. She's requesting full anonymity for now. Says she doesn't want to be a symbol, just wants to finish what she started. The voice on the other end replied, "She already is a symbol." Phones were ringing non-stop. Every desk, every office, every hallway. Screens lit up with headlines moving faster than the department could manage. Pregnant black woman kicked by officer. DOJ confirms federal witness status. The video had hit over 3 million views in 12 hours. Cable news, Twitter, live streams from advocacy groups. The story had become oxygen, spreading and igniting every platform it touched. And inside Atlanta Metro PD headquarters, chaos was quietly detonating behind every closed door. Captain Avery slammed the door shut behind her, eyes like fire. "You just cost us everything." Cooper stood stiff in the conference room, arms crossed, but shoulders trembling. "I did what I was trained to do." "No, you did what your ego trained you to do," she snapped. The legal advisor to the department stepped forward. "We have a potential lawsuit incoming from the DOJ. If that woman presses charges, the entire city could be on trial by the end of the month. And if the footage goes into federal evidence," someone muttered, "that means discovery. Everything we've hidden, every time we covered for—" "Stop talking," Avery barked. A thick silence followed. Cooper sat down hard in a chair, hands shaking. He'd never been under this kind of spotlight. He thought the media would spin it like usual, claim she was resisting, make him the misunderstood officer. But something was off this time. The silence from the department's top brass. It was the kind that meant someone had seen what he hadn't. Someone bigger was in play. 4 floors down, behind a locked door labeled simply Internal Ops, a detective named Ramirez sat alone with a manila file. He'd pulled everything on the woman, at least what he could find. The system had no record of her under the name she gave at the hospital, but it did have another name, one tied to a sealed federal case from 3 years ago, one tied to a murder conviction of a police officer in Louisiana, one tied to a key witness who had never shown up to testify, vanished under witness protection after multiple attempts on her life. Ramirez leaned back in his chair. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He typed the old case number. What popped up sent a chill down his spine. Witness, Evelyn Grace Monroe, protected class Alpha. Status, active. Clearance, red level 3. DOJ. Watch list, high sensitivity. The photo attached? It was her. Same. Face, same eyes. Ramirez started, breath held. They hadn't just kicked a pregnant woman on the sidewalk. They had assaulted a high-level federal witness tied to a police corruption scandal that had taken down 3 southern precincts and could take down more. Back at the DOJ safe house, Evelyn Grace Monroe sat still, arms resting on the curve of her belly. The agent watching her door knocked softly and entered. "They know now," he said. She didn't respond. He hesitated. "You sure you're ready for this to come out again? You've been off-grid for 3 years." Evelyn looked at him with steel in her eyes. "I didn't come out. He dragged me into the light." The agent nodded. "We've moved your son to a secure location. He's safe. Just say the word if you want this whole thing sealed back up." But Evelyn already knew. There was no sealing this up anymore. The system had touched her again, and this time she would burn it down from the inside. By morning, the courthouse steps were covered in signs. Cardboard, spray paint, red tape, the kind of homemade fury that didn't need polish to make a statement. Protect black women. No justice, no peace. Her blood is on your badge. Local news crews lined the streets. Protesters began gathering with masks, megaphones, strollers, and tears. It wasn't just about one woman anymore. It was about all the ones before her. The ones who never got the video, never got the press, never got a voice. Inside the department, tension had crystallized into division. Half the officers walked silently, heads down, avoiding eye contact with anyone in uniform. The other half defended Cooper behind closed doors, calling it an overreaction, a federal setup, a weaponized PR stunt. But the video had spoken, and the public had chosen a side, and it wasn't his. In the locker room, Officer Jensen sat with his hands clasped, staring at the bench in front of him. He and Cooper had shared patrols for years, covered for each other, but now he remembered the kid Cooper shoved 3 months ago. A 13-year-old, the lie they told, the paperwork they doctored, and he remembered the silence that followed. He stood up, tossed his badge into his locker, and shut the door. The press conference was brief. Mayor Thompson, flanked by her chief of staff, stepped up to the podium. We are aware of the incident involving Officer Bradley Cooper and a civilian who is now confirmed to be a protected federal witness. We are cooperating fully with the Department of Justice. We will not be commenting further until the investigation concludes. A reporter shouted from the back, "Do you know who she is?" The mayor paused, her jaw clenched. We all do now. At a diner 2 blocks from City, Evelyn sat in a booth, hoodie pulled low over her eyes. Her protection details stayed outside, one at the counter, one at the corner window, pretending to be on a laptop. She sipped her tea. Slow, measured. A waitress passed by and stopped. "You okay, honey? You look like you've been through something." Evelyn looked up, smiled faintly. "Yeah, something like that." The woman gave her a to-go cup. "This one's on the house." As the waitress walked away, Evelyn's burner phone buzzed. It was a private link, a Reddit post. She tapped it. There it was. Her name, Evelyn Grace Monroe. Photos from the old case. Blurred courtroom sketches, newspaper clippings from the corruption trial, comments flooding in. She's the one who vanished after testifying. They tried to kill her once. Now they found her again. What did she do to get protected? Like that? She's not just some victim. She's dangerous. Evelyn didn't flinch. She closed the link, placed the phone face down on the table, let them dig, let them speculate. Truth didn't need protection anymore. It needed exposure. And this time, she wouldn't run. She'd walk right into the fire. The march started with 30 people. By noon, it was 15,000. Stretching across Martin Luther King Jr., drive like a river of grief, pride, and rage. Signs lifted skyward, voices hoarse from chants that had been recycled for generations. Mothers pushed strollers beside grandfathers. In military jackets, students held posters with Evelyn's name bolded across their chests. Her face wasn't fully known, but her story had become the city's heartbeat. Evelyn watched from a secured rooftop nearby, flanked by federal observers. She hadn't spoken publicly yet. She didn't need to. The silence had carried its own message, and now the noise would carry the rest. Below, people chanted in waves. "Say her name. Evelyn Grace. Protect our mothers." Cooper sat alone in his apartment, blinds drawn, TV off, hands clasped. The union had offered legal counsel, but none of it mattered anymore. His name wasn't just trending, it was rotting. Old reports were resurfacing. Whispers in the department had turned into printed leaks. Former colleagues had begun scrubbing their history with him. He reached for a bottle on the table. Empty. His badge sat next to it like a ghost of the man he thought he was. Across town, Evelyn's phone vibrated. A private number, no text, just a file link. She tapped it. It opened into a classified memo. Internal affairs from 2 years ago. Redacted. But Cooper's name was there. Linked to 6 unresolved complaints. And then another name. Sergeant Tiller, a known abuser in New Orleans. Evelyn's stomach tightened. She remembered him. He was the first one who tried to silence her during the Louisiana case. Brutal, manipulative, untouchable. She thought he'd been removed, but the file showed something else. He had transferred, quietly, to Atlanta. Same year, Cooper got promoted. Her eyes narrowed. This wasn't random. This wasn't about one kick. This was a chain, a pattern, a system. Evelyn forwarded the file to Marcus Dale. No message, just the document. She turned to the agent beside her. "Tell the DOJ I'm ready to speak, publicly." "You sure?" he asked. "Once you do this, there's no going back." She looked down at the sea of protesters below. Her voice was steady. "I don't want to go back." Marcus Dale stared at the screen in front of him, jaw clenched. The names, the dates, the transfer records. It was all there now, neatly organized in a secure digital file marked Eyes Only. Cooper wasn't just another rogue cop. He had been planted, recruited into a network that spanned 3 states, dozens of precincts, and hundreds of sealed complaints. This wasn't just a corruption case anymore. It was a coordinated cover-up, one that had quietly erased women, silenced witnesses, and buried truths with retirement checks and fake citations. Evelyn had unknowingly walked back into the very structure she once escaped, and now, because of one kick in broad daylight, the rot was exposed again. Dale stood up from the console, grabbed his coat, and walked toward the exit. He had to warn her. He didn't trust anyone inside the Atlanta PD now, not after what he'd just seen. At that same moment, Evelyn stood in front of a mirror inside the DOJ's safehouse media room. Her hair was pinned back tight. Her dress was formal, navy blue, professional, but her hands trembled slightly at her sides. Not from fear, from memory. The last time she stood under lights like this, cameras flashing, she'd lost everything. Her home, her job, her safety. And she hadn't spoken publicly since. But silence had never been protection. It had just delayed the war. The agent beside her gave a short nod. "Live in 60 seconds. Evelyn closed her eyes, breathed in once, twice, then stepped forward, into the spotlight. "My name is Evelyn Grace Monroe," she began, "and 3 years ago I testified against a group of police officers involved in the murder of a black teenager in New Orleans." Her voice was clear, sharp, unapologetic. "I was placed under federal protection after multiple attempts were made on my life. I was moved, erased, rebuilt, and for 3 years I stayed quiet to survive. But last week, on a sidewalk in Atlanta, that silence was broken." She paused, staring into the lens like she was staring into the soul of every person watching. "The officer who kicked me is not the first. He will not be the last. But he will be the one who cracks the foundation." Phones buzzed across the country. Social media exploded. Activists cut together live footage and rally clips. Her name trended again, this time not as a victim, as a force. But in a dark office back at headquarters, someone was already moving against her. A laptop screen glowed with a chat window. A nameless user typed, "She's about to blow this whole thing up. Do it now." A reply came back in seconds. "Hospital. Location confirmed. Room 214. No cameras past the second floor. Send delete close." The hunt had begun again. The hallway was too quiet. Marcus Dale moved fast, badge flipped out but gun still holstered. The security team flanked him, 2 agents tight to his left. On the 4th floor of the private wing, the lights flickered once, then held steady. Room 214 was just ahead. He tapped his earpiece. "Status?" "Perimeter clear," a voice replied. But motion sensors tripped 20 seconds ago. South stairwell. Dale didn't wait. He burst into the suite, hand on his weapon, scanning the corners. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, calm. She didn't flinch. "You're late," she said. He exhaled, stepping closer. "Are you all right?" "They didn't make it through the door." "What happened?" She nodded to the window. "Someone tried to cut the latch, left fingerprints on the frame." One of the agents moved to the curtain, inspecting the latch. They were prepared. Rubber gloves, glass cutter. This wasn't random. "No," Dale said, looking around. "It never is." Evelyn stood, walking slowly across the room, hand resting on her stomach. "Why now?" she asked. "Because you're not the only one they're afraid of," Dale replied. "They're afraid of what you represent, that your silence isn't guaranteed anymore." She met his gaze. "Then they should be very afraid." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "We got a name, Sergeant Tiller." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "I thought he'd disappeared." "He did. Resurfaced here. Same circle as Cooper, same tactics. He's the one who leaked your location." She turned her face slightly. "Then he's already lost. If they know I'm talking, they know the system's coming for them." "You sure about that?" "No," she said. "But I'm done hiding." He watched her for a moment, then nodded once. "We'll move you, change locations, double your detail." "I don't want to run," she said. "I want to finish this." "You will. But you'll need protection to do it." She walked back to the bed and picked up a small notebook, flipping it open. "Do you remember a name from Louisiana?" she asked. "Derek Hill." Dale paused. "Yeah, internal auditor. Testified before the final hearing." She looked up. "He's in Atlanta now. Works for a civilian oversight committee. I want to meet him." "You think he'll help?" "I think he's the only one who can show the paper trail from the inside." Dale gave a slow nod. "Then we set it up. But Evelyn," he looked her dead in the eye, "after this, there's no middle ground. They're going to come harder." She closed the notebook steady. "Then I'll stand taller." The diner was old, dimly lit, and mostly forgotten. Booths patched with duct tape, a jukebox that hadn't worked in years, and the faint smell of burnt coffee in the air. It was perfect, safe, quiet, neutral. Evelyn sat in the back corner, her hoodie up again, hands wrapped around a ceramic mug that had been chipped along the rim. The agent guarding her stood near the door, pretending to read a menu. Her eyes didn't leave the entrance. At exactly 3:04 p.m., Derek Hill walked in. He looked older than she remembered. Grey at the temples, glasses now, a little thinner. But the eyes, those calculating, sharp eyes, hadn't changed. He slid into the booth across from her without a word. "I didn't think you'd show," Evelyn said. "I almost didn't," he replied. "Too many people asking too many questions lately." "You've been watching?" "I've been surviving." She nodded slowly. "You know why I'm here?" "I figured. The kick woke up the city." "No," she said. The kick revealed it was never asleep. He looked around, then pulled out a small drive wrapped in a napkin. "This is everything I've got. Internal memos, payroll anomalies, complaint records buried in HR departments. They've been doing this for years, Evelyn. Cooper wasn't the first. He's just the one dumb enough to get caught on camera." She took the drive carefully. "And Tiller, he's worse than you remember," Derek said. "He's not just running cover, he's building a wall around every bad cop in the city. He's the one funneling hush money to victims. He signed off on Cooper's last 3 promotions." Her eyes hardened. "How do we bring him down?" "I have one more file," he said. "It ties him to an off-the-books fund used to silence brutality claims, but it's not on the drive." "Where is it?" "My office, printed. I don't trust digital for that kind of thing." "Then let's go." He hesitated. "It's not safe tonight. Give me 12 hours. I'll bring it to your team myself." "But Evelyn," he lowered his voice, "they're watching everyone now, not just you, me too." She nodded once. "Be careful, Derek." He stood up, dropping some cash on the table. "You're the bravest person I ever met," he said softly. But don't make the mistake of thinking you're bulletproof now. I'm not, she said. I'm just done being invisible. He walked out without another word. She finished her coffee, eyes steady. 20 minutes later, Derek Hill's body was found slumped behind the wheel of his car in a parking garage 2 blocks away, shot once in the chest. No witnesses, no footage, no weapon found, but everyone knew he wasn't supposed to talk. The news came just before midnight, a knock on the door, a whisper in Marcus Dale's earpiece, a pause in Evelyn's breath before anyone even said the words, Derek. Hill's dead. Evelyn didn't speak for a full minute. She just stood by the window staring at the skyline like she was trying to memorize it. Then she turned slowly, her voice low and certain. They're not going to stop. Marcus nodded grimly. They can't afford to. He was going to bring us proof. I know. She sat down, pulled her notebook close, and began writing. Names, places, patterns. Everything she could remember from the conversation, every lead he hinted at, every file he mentioned. He gave me something, she said. A drive. It's not all, but it's enough to start tearing seams. Marcus paced behind her. We'll have to go public again. Not in another press conference, she said. No suits, no podium. This time they need to see me as I am. He nodded. Let me get a camera. 3 hours later, a video went live on every platform that mattered. Evelyn sat in a chair, no makeup, no background, just plain truth. My name is Evelyn Grace Monroe, she began. And the man who tried to help me yesterday is now dead. Shot once in the chest. They say no witnesses, but we're all witnesses now. She looked directly into the lens. They want us to be afraid. They want us to be quiet. But here's what they forgot. You kill one of us, we multiply. You silence one voice, 1,000 more rise. The video spread like a flame in dry grass. Within an hour, it had 1 million views. Within 2, the hashtags We Are Evelyn and Justice for Derek was trending in 40 states. People flooded downtown with candles and signs, chanting his name, Hill's name, Evelyn's, the ones who came before. The ones who never got named. Inside the police department, silence. The kind that sounded like guilt. The kind that always came right before collapse. Captain Avery stared at the footage from her office, fists clenched at her side. She knew the system was bleeding now, and she knew someone on her floor had made that call, pulled that trigger, deleted that camera, but Evelyn's face wouldn't leave her screen. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was taking over. You want what? Dale's voice was sharp, his eyes wide with disbelief. I want to see him, Evelyn said. Face to face, no glass, no lawyers. You're not serious. I've never been more. Dale paced the length of the room, frustration rolling off him in waves. Evelyn, this isn't a movie. Tiller isn't some small-time racist cop with a temper. He's a strategist, a manipulator. He'll twist everything, bait you, gaslight you, and make it look like you're unstable. I don't need to convince him of anything, she said. I need to let him know the game's over. Dale stared at her, his jaw tight. If I set this up, it's against protocol. I could lose my badge. She walked up to him slowly. You're either with me in this, or you're just another name in a sealed file. Silence. Then a breath. I'll get it done. 3 hours. Later, Evelyn sat alone in a small interview room deep in the DOJ facility, surrounded by cameras but with no guards inside. The door opened. Sergeant Tiller walked in. He wasn't in uniform, just a grey shirt, sleeves rolled. Calm, collected, like this was just another formality, but his eyes gave him away. They scanned too fast, flicked toward the cameras. Note the distance to the exit. He was calculating. He sat down across from her, slow and deliberate. You've caused quite a mess, he said. You've covered up worse, she replied. He smirked. You really think you've changed anything? No, she said. I think I've exposed everything. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. You think people care. They'll move on. They always do. Hashtag one day, forgotten the next. Not this time, she said. Not with your name attached. Tiller's. Smile faded. She opened a folder and slid it across the table. Internal payouts, complaint seals, officer rotations across 3 states. Derek gave me enough to burn the foundation down. He didn't touch the folder. Is this why you had him killed? She asked softly. He didn't blink. You don't get it, he said. We don't kill people. We eliminate threats. That's different. And what am I? She asked. He finally looked her in the eye. You're a spark. She nodded slowly. Good, because sparks start fires. She stood up. This isn't about me anymore, Tiller. This is about every name you buried, every badge you protect, every check you signed. And now, she walked to the door. Now it's your name they're chanting. She opened the door without looking back. You're done. Behind her, for the first time, he looked afraid. The video leaked just after sunrise. It wasn't from the DOJ. It wasn't part of any official investigation. It came from a burner account, anonymous, untraceable, and it hit the internet like a bomb. Body cam. Footage, dozens of clips, all time-stamped, all edited together. Beatings, harassment, racial slurs muttered under breath, people slammed into the pavement, reports rewritten in front of cameras, victims ignored, officers laughing, Cooper, Tiller, others. It was worse than anyone imagined. Each clip faded in with a date and out with a line in bold. No disciplinary action taken by 9 a.m. It had reached 10 million views. By noon, it had crippled the Atlanta PD's press office. Inside the department, officers were running scared. Captain Avery slammed her hand on a desk. Find the leak, now! But they couldn't, because the leak wasn't outside. It was one of their own. Officer Jensen stood in the locker room, staring at his own face in one of the leaked clips. He'd been there. Not doing the beating, but not stopping it either. He remembered the victim's face, a teenager, no weapon, just a hoodie and headphones. He couldn't take it anymore. So the night before, he'd pulled every file he could, every redacted report, every erased complaint. He compiled them, uploaded them, and now the whole world knows. Evelyn watched the footage in silence. Marcus Dale stood beside her. We didn't release this. I know, she said. Someone inside the department did. Good, she whispered. Outside, the protests tripled in size. People marched with screens strapped to their backs, replaying the footage on loop. Churches opened their doors, businesses shut down in solidarity. Schools held walkouts. A group of students formed a human chain across the courthouse steps, chanting her name. Evelyn didn't speak. She didn't need to. The country was speaking for her now. Inside a quiet break room at City Hall, Mayor Thompson sat with her head in. Her hands were losing control, her chief of staff whispered. We never had it, she replied. We just had silence. In the hallway outside Evelyn's room, an agent received a call. He answered quickly, then knocked twice and entered. They've just arrested Tiller. Evelyn blinked. What? Resisting federal inquiry, destruction of classified evidence, and obstruction. A long pause. Then she smiled. The wall is coming down. The room was dark, lit only by the cold glow of a laptop screen. Cooper sat at the edge of his bed, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, hands trembling slightly as he hit record. He looked into the camera, searching for words, but none came easily. I know what the world thinks of me right now, he began, voice hoarse. I've seen the clips, the edits, the headlines, the protests. I've heard my name chanted like I'm some kind of monster. He paused, breathing hard through his nose. But I wasn't out there trying to hurt anyone. I was doing my job. I was following orders. The city wanted an order, and I gave it to them. He looked away for a second, then back. You don't understand what it's like out there, what we're up against, the crime, the chaos, the hate. We have to make fast decisions. We don't get time to think. Another pause. I didn't know she was pregnant. I didn't know who she was. But even if I had, would it have mattered? You want a villain? Fine. Paint me one. His tone shifted. But ask yourself, how many others did the same things and didn't get caught? How? Many walked free while I'm here rotting in hiding? He stood up suddenly, pacing in front of the webcam. They used me. The department, the union, the city. I was just a tool, disposable, replaceable. He stopped, looked into the camera again. Tell them I was just doing my job. Then he reached forward and shut the laptop. But what Cooper didn't know, what he didn't expect, was that the video had already been intercepted. He'd sent it to a journalist he thought was sympathetic. He didn't realize the account was being monitored by the DOJ Cyber Division. Within hours, the video was leaked, but instead of gaining sympathy, it triggered rage, because the video wasn't an apology. It was a confession, a window into the mind of a man who still didn't understand what he had done. The hashtags changed again. Just doing my job. Yet this is the system. Gerard goes deeper evil and watched the clip once, then turned to Marcus. He doesn't even know what he's saying. No, Marcus said. And that's the scariest part. Across the city, more resignations came in. 3 lieutenants, 1 deputy chief. 2 city council members quietly announced they wouldn't seek re-election. The city wasn't just watching anymore, it was waking up. The courtroom was standing room only. Reporters filled the benches. Activists crowded the back wall. Federal marshals flanked the entryways, hands resting on holsters, eyes sharp. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but everyone knew. This testimony would echo far beyond the walls. Evelyn sat on the witness stand, one hand resting on her belly, the other steady on the armrest. She wore no jewelry, no flashy colors, just a clean black blouse, a quiet strength. The judge looked down at her over his glasses. "Ms. Monroe, when you're ready." She nodded once, then began. "My name is Evelyn Grace Monroe. I was placed under federal protection after testifying in a case involving the murder of a black teenager by multiple police officers in Louisiana. That case led to 3 precinct shutdowns and a dozen convictions. I was hidden for safety. I became invisible to survive, but I never stopped remembering." She paused. 3 weeks ago, I was kicked in the stomach by Officer Bradley Cooper in broad daylight. I was pregnant. I was on a public sidewalk. I was unarmed, speaking to no one. He told me to move. I didn't move fast enough, so he kicked me. A murmur passed through the crowd. The judge raised a hand. Silence returned. That kick wasn't about me. It was about power. It was a reflex born from a culture that has taught men like him that black women's bodies don't matter, that our pain is performative, that our fear is theatrical, that our silence is compliance. She looked across the room, locking eyes with the defense table. Cooper sat there, looking down. He hadn't made eye contact once. I didn't cry. Out that day, I didn't beg, I didn't scream, because I knew someone was watching. I just didn't know it was the world. She shifted in her seat, leaning slightly forward. I came here today not because I want revenge, but because I want acknowledgement. I want the system to look itself in the mirror. I want every officer who's ever lied on a report, or stayed quiet when they saw abuse, or rolled their eyes when someone said, "Not all cops." I want them to feel what I felt, not the kick, the silence that came after. She paused again. The room held its breath. "We're not asking any more. We are demanding dignity, safety, truth, and we're not leaving until we get it." The judge tapped his gavel softly. "Thank you, Ms. Monroe." As Evelyn stood and stepped down, the gallery rose in a silent wave of respect. Not a word. Not a cheer. Just stillness, reverence. Outside, the city had come to a standstill. Screens in shop windows played the broadcast. Office workers stood in lobbies, watching subtitles roll across live coverage. School children sat in classrooms with eyes wide open. In front of the courthouse, the crowd erupted into applause. Not chaos, not violence, just hands clapping with the weight of history behind every beat. Marcus met her in the hallway. "You did it." She looked at him, not smiling, not crying, just grounded. "No," she said. "We just started." The courthouse lights burned long into the night. Inside, clerks whispered behind stacks of case files. Federal agents moved between chambers with folders pressed tightly to their chests. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew the truth. This verdict wouldn't just decide one man's future, it would decide the system's soul. City Hall was in freefall. Officials scrambled behind closed doors, deleting emails, printing last-minute statements, checking loyalty lists. Phone lines buzzed with legal threats and backdoor negotiations. Everyone wanted distance now, from Cooper, from Tiller, from the very institutions that had fed them power for years. Mayor Thompson stood at her office window, arms crossed, eyes scanning the city. Her chief of staff placed a tablet on her desk. "These are the names requesting private counsel, 9 so far, 2 from the review board, 1 from your office." She didn't flinch. "Burn the list. We don't negotiate with rot." The governor's team is also asking for distance. They want no direct statement until after the ruling. "Cowards," she said under her breath. Meanwhile, inside Atlanta PD headquarters, panic dripped from every hallway like a slow leak from a broken pipe. Files were being boxed, desks cleared. Officers who had once mocked Evelyn's name now tiptoed through their shifts like the floor might collapse. In a dim, locked room beneath the records department, someone tried one last desperate play. Sergeant Melton, Cooper's former supervisor, inserted a flash drive into a private terminal. The screen lit up with sealed complaint logs, footage archives, and disciplinary letters never filed. He hovered over the delete key. One press, and years of misconduct would vanish. One press, and he'd protect the names of everyone who helped. Bury the truth. But his finger froze. The door opened behind him. Captain Avery, her eyes burned through him. "Step away from the terminal," she said. He hesitated. "It's not too late. We can still protect the badge." She took a step closer. "No. The badge means nothing if it only hides the blood." He lowered his hand. The screen stays lit. The files are intact. In another part of the building, Officer Jensen submitted his official resignation, signed, stamped, and accompanied by a sealed statement outlining everything he had seen, everything he had kept quiet about. He handed it to Internal Affairs and walked out without looking back. And in a tiny hospital room just outside the city limits, Evelyn sat quietly, watching the clock. Her hand rested on her stomach. The baby kicked once, gently. Marcus stood beside the door, silent. "They're trying to bury the verdict," she said softly. "They can't," he replied. "Not anymore. Too many eyes." Evelyn turned to him. Her voice didn't shake. "Then let them dig." The room was packed to the brim. It felt like the entire weight of the city was condensed into that space. Every seat was taken, and still, people were standing in the aisles, leaning against the walls, holding their breath. Reporters were scribbling, phones were recording, and the quiet hum of tension vibrated in the air. This was the moment. Evelyn sat in the front row, her hands neatly folded in her lap, her posture composed, though there was a quiet energy in the air around her. She had been through so much already, and yet today was different. Today she wasn't just sitting in a courtroom. She was sitting at the heart of history. Her presence was the manifestation of everything the world had been waiting for. She could feel the eyes of the city on her. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about everyone who had ever been silenced, whose pain had never been acknowledged, whose voices had never been heard. Today, that changed. Marcus Dale sat beside her. His eyes were steady, his expression unreadable. He wasn't here for the judgment. He was here for Evelyn, for the revolution she had ignited. They had fought together for months, but today it felt like all their efforts had led to this single moment. He wasn't nervous, he wasn't worried. He knew Evelyn was stronger than any fear that could try to creep in. The judge entered the room, and the air seemed to still. The gavel came down once, and everything became silent. It was like the world was holding its breath, waiting for the verdict to be read. The judge's voice rang clear as he called for order. "Will the defendant please rise?" The words hit the air like a slap. Officer Bradley Cooper stood, his frame large, his shoulders sagging in defeat. The arrogant officer who had arrogantly tried to justify his actions, who thought he was untouchable, now stood at the mercy of the law. His eyes were hollow, empty. It was as if he had finally realized the weight of the destruction he had caused. The judge cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. The courtroom was deathly quiet. "The charges against you, Officer Cooper, have been deliberated upon, and we have come to a conclusion." There was a moment of suspended silence. Evelyn didn't look at Cooper. She didn't need to. Her focus was sharp, cutting through the layers of tension like a blade. She knew this moment would be remembered, but it wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Guilty of aggravated assault on a federal witness, guilty of unlawful use of force, you are sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. The words echoed in the room, filling every crevice of the space. It wasn't just the sound of the gavel, it was the sound of something far greater. It was the sound of the walls of injustice beginning to crack. Cooper's face contorted in shock, but it didn't last long. His eyes darted to the defense table and then quickly to the floor, unable to face the world anymore. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The weight of his conviction crushed him in a way that nothing else had ever managed to do. Evelyn didn't flinch. She didn't react. Her body was still, her face calm, but inside, a fire burned. This wasn't just a victory over Cooper. This was a victory for every single person who had been brutalized, mistreated, and ignored by the system. It was a victory for the silent, for the forgotten, for the oppressed. The courtroom began to stir. There were whispers, gasps, and then a subtle, yet growing applause. It started from the back, a small group of people rising to their feet, clapping softly. Slowly the applause spread, louder and more intense, until it was a unified roar. Outside, the protests were already swelling. The sound of chants rose from the streets. "Justice is ours! Dignity, not silence! Evelyn, Evelyn, Evelyn!" The cheers were deafening. The streets outside the courthouse were packed with people, hands lifted in solidarity, banners waving in the air, a sea of faces that had been waiting for this moment. This was more than just a court victory. This was a movement, a revolution. Evelyn stood slowly. She felt the weight of the moment settle in her chest. This wasn't just a win for her. This was a win for everyone who had been told to sit down, shut up, and accept what was happening. This was a win for the thousands of people who had fought, marched, and bled for justice. And now the world could see that change was possible. She walked out of the courtroom, her head held high, her stride steady. The crowd outside parted like the Red Sea, creating a path for her. As she reached the top of the courthouse steps, she paused for a moment, looking out over the sea of people who had gathered to watch, to witness history. The weight of their gaze didn't overwhelm her. It fueled her. She raised her hand, not in a gesture of triumph, but in solidarity. "We did this together," she said, her voice clear, strong, and unwavering. "This is just the beginning. We will keep fighting. We will keep speaking, and we will not stop until this system answers. For all of us," her words hung in the air. The crowd, once loud with their chants, fell silent, absorbing every word she spoke. This wasn't a call to action. This was a declaration, a promise. The applause that followed was deafening. People cheered, clapped, and shouted in unison. But this time it wasn't just about her. It was about the people who had been overlooked for far too long. It was about every name that had been erased, every face that had been ignored. As Evelyn made her way through the crowd, she could feel the shift in the air. The weight of history had been lifted, and a new chapter had begun. This wasn't just the end of one fight, it was the beginning of a larger war for justice. The world had heard them, and now nothing would ever be the same again.